One point on the graph is labeled A. Jamal examined the scatter plot and determined that a linear model would be a reasonable way to express the relationship. A computer output from the linear regression is shown here. The point on the graph labeled A represents a car of length 175 inches and an FCR of 5.88. Calculate and interpret the residual for the car relative to the least squares regression line. Okay. So, means that the actual point on the graph is that. And the equation is and since this is the equation and we know x, plug x in, and then solve for that, which ends up getting us to y hat equals 4.92. Now to calculate the residual, y minus I hat, which means 5.88 minus 4.92, which equals 0.96. So that means that the predicted FCR was 0.96 lower than the actual FCR at this point. So the regression line underestimated the FCR of this particular vehicle. And that's how to do part A. Graph 2 is a scatter plot showing the engine size of the 66 cars plotted with the residuals from the regression of FCR on length, whereas graph 3 is a scatter plot showing the wheelbase of the 66 cars plotted with the corresponding residuals from the regression of the FCR on length. Here are the two graphs. And for part B, in graph 2, the point labeled A corresponds to the same car whose point was labeled A in graph 1. The measurements for the car represented by point A are given as FCR 5.88, length 175 inches, engine size 3.6 liters, and wheelbase 93 inches. Part 1 of part B involves circling the point on graph 3 that corresponds to the car represented by point A on graphs 1 and 2, and as you can see, it is here. And in part 2, there is a point on graph 3 labeled B. It is very close to the horizontal line at 0. What does that indicate about the FCR of the car represented by point B? Point B. And what that indicates is that the prediction of the FCR that was based on the length of the car represented by point B was very, very accurate. And it indicates that the FCR of the car at point B is very close to the FCR predicted by the regression line. So they're almost the same. And that's part B.
And here are the two graphs again. Okay, so based on graph 2, which is engine size, there appears to be a slight positive linear association between engine size and the residuals from the regression of FCR on length. This could indicate that the engine size makes it harder to predict FCR based on length, since the greater the engine size, the greater the residual from the regression of FCR on length. And then for graph 3, which is wheelbase, there doesn't appear to be any association in graph 3, and this indicates that wheelbase doesn't affect the residuals from the regression of FCR on length. So we chose engine size because the linear association indicates that engine size does have an effect on the prediction, which means that it's a variable that affects FCR based on length, and therefore we would want to use that variable because wheelbase doesn't actually have any effect, so it wouldn't really improve the prediction. And that is AP question number 6.
Mm-hmm.